Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Bartkus, the Executive Director here at the Ridgefield Historical Society. Today's date is Tuesday, October 21st, 2025, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the Ridgefield Historical Society's Ridgefield History Club. We're here at the Scott House at 4 Sunset Lane in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Thank you to everyone in attendance here and everyone watching us on Facebook. Today we're going to be talking about the history of St. Stephen's Church. And our special guests today are Reverend Altopp, Linda Berry, Lizzie Hanson, and others from St. Stephen's Church. I would like to remind you that this is an informal discussion program, so if you have memories of your time at St. Stephen's Church, we would love to hear them today. The Ridgefield Historical Society is also spearheading an oral history initiative called Voices of St. Stephen's. So we are very interested in collecting your stories and your memories of St. Stephen's Church to preserve here at the Ridgefield Historical Society. And we are so excited about their 300th anniversary. So they were established in 1725. And they have published a beautiful book, which you can see on the table there to commemorate their 300th anniversary. And we have copies available for sale today. And if anyone out there on Facebook would like a copy, Reverend Altopp will be able to talk a little bit about that coming up, about how you could get one of those for yourselves. So again, thank you all for joining us. And the Ridgefield Historical Society is dedicated to collecting, preserving, and sharing the remarkable history of Ridgefield, and I invite all of you to get involved here in the important work that we do for the community by becoming volunteers and members of our organization. We occasionally have done this. I'd like to start by going around the room, and if everyone could briefly introduce themselves, first name and last name, and we could take it from there.
Okay, John Tollimer.
Barbara Gargan. I came about a year and a half ago from Boston, Mass.
Jack Sanders.
Sally Sanders. I'm Terry McManus from the Ridgefield Garden Club, and many of our past members were very active at St. Stephen's, so very interested in history.
Elaine Kellerman.
Lynn Mullen.
Aileen Egan.
Keith Russell.
Me. Oh, the Reverend Dr. Whitney Altopp. I'm from St. Stephen's.
Linda Berry, St. Stephen's.
Lizzie Hanson, St. Stephen's.
Barbara Sirfilippi. Joyce Leachy.
Pete Nichols.
Sandy Mazziello.
Pat Lagos. Laurie McGavin Bachman, St. Stephen's.
And Liz Tollimer, and we moved from New York about a year ago and love it here, love it.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I think it might be nice to start with Reverend Altopp, and maybe you could say a few words about the history of the church and your 300th anniversary and what you guys are doing and what that means to you, and a little bit about the book, and then maybe we could jump in and have a discussion, and everyone could start sharing their memories as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm really pleased to be with you today. If you're wondering how to address me, yes, you can call me Whitney. That will work. Reverend Whitney is something that most people feel comfortable calling me, but my favorite is Mother Whitney, because I was ordained with the same ordination that men were, and I'm not a father. And you'll get to hear a little bit about how that has come to pass. It is a real blessing to be with you all today. Linda Berry and Lizzie Hanson have joined me because they were two of the writers of this book. I'm indebted to Lori Bachman and Linda Berry for coming up, asking if they could have a few minutes of my time, because they had an idea for our 300th, which was this book. And I was particularly thrilled because I also had thought of the same thing, but this is a big undertaking and I don't know how to do it. So with the two of them, we felt like we had enough strength to start to sort it all out. And indeed, this book has 5 different authors that contributed. You'll see many different sources in the book, including Jack Sanders here, and some other Ridgefield, and then broader Connecticut sources as well. So we thought we might just tell you briefly a couple things that we learned about our own church in writing this history and what it meant to us. I was particularly interested in the clergy's experience. It's a very unique life to be a clergy person. And so I was, and the dynamics between the clergy and the laity. When the church began, it was a missionary, a mission effort of the Church of England, and that's why we started in 1725, and we weren't even called St. Stephen's at that time. But there were faithful people that gathered every week to worship, and were led by an Anglican priest who had been sent over here from England to, convert the masses to the true faith. And indeed, we had issues as a congregation then, because it was mandated that all Connecticut residents pay a tax to the congregational minister to support him. And clergy during that time lived off of people's donations. So those that gathered together as the worshiping community petitioned the state to be relieved of that tax, and instead to direct their money toward their own clergy person. So already we were seeing that desire to separate church and state. Then the guy, Epinetus Townsend, which I don't know why anyone doesn't use the name Epinetus anymore. I don't, somebody needs to bring that name back. But he was the clergyman just at the point of the Revolution, and preached to his congregation to stay loyal to the crown. And at first that was okay. But it slowly grew to be an annoyance of the Ridgefield congregation, and they drove him out of town. He was going to remain loyal to the crown. So these were intriguing things for me to notice, along with the history of the Episcopal Church in the ordination of women, or the Anglican Communion in the ordination of women. Thanks to Lizzie's good research, that church tried to do it in the 40s in another part of the world, and it kind of a bubble that burst and just went flat. So it really wasn't until the Civil Rights Movement that the Episcopal Church in the United States got the gumption to let women move into ordained roles. So when we wrote this book, it was so important to me that we feature women, because they didn't have, like, the things that history captures, they weren't in it. They weren't on the governing body of the church until the early 70s. So all the people making decisions, who were taking the notes and were in the pictures, they were all men. So the altar guild, where you serve to help assist at the altar, was a huge piece of women's contribution in the church until the 70s, when women were allowed to be elected to the governing body of the church, the vestry. And then we also featured some women who gave a lot of money because they could, and that was the way they could really influence the church, was through their philanthropy. So we wanted to bring their stories forward, even though it might have seemed a little uncouth to, or just not as glorious to highlight them. So those are some things I really valued from this book and this experience. Do you want to share?
Sure.
Linda?
I wrote the first chapter. Whitney wrote the introduction, and my chapter was called Beginnings. And we were founded, as she said, in 1725 by Samuel Johnson. And one of the things that I learned in writing Beginnings is that I'd always heard that St. Stephen's had been burned down by the British during the Battle of Ridgefield. And that's not quite true, it's partly true. It was burned, but not burned down, the morning after the Battle of Ridgefield. I think it was the British Army's parting shot to Ridgefield to set fire to the church. And the church hadn't been used as a church for well over a year before it happened. It had been taken over by the commissary department of the Patriots. And a new church that was the first church building, and it was built in 1740. But it was not usable after the British burned it. So they thought they were going to fix it, and then they decided that it was just not worth fixing. It was too much. It needed too much. So they finally finished the next church in 1791. It took them many years to rebuild it. And one of my big surprises in this was the ministerial tax. Mm-hmm. If I'd been born and raised in Connecticut, maybe it wouldn't have surprised me that the Congregationalists they were the official religion. But I was born and raised with the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. And Samuel Johnson, he founded our church, but he also founded many other Episcopal churches. And he also started a rectory school to train priests. And one of the priests that he trained was Samuel Seabury, who became the first American bishop. And, oh, there's Betsy Reed, who helped us a little bit. Thank you. She was very helpful to us when we were doing this book, as was the Historical Society in general. I'm going to pass it on to Lizzie.
Okay, boy, that was a good segue. We have not rehearsed this at all. Samuel Seabury, from both what you said and what you said. He was the first person chosen to go to England to be anointed by the Anglican Church over there to be a bishop in this country, except the problem was that we'd separated. This was 1783. And he had to take an oath to King George. Well, he couldn't do that. So the Anglican bishops could not make him a bishop. So he tried for a couple of years, and then he finally traveled 500 miles, I think, to Scotland and was made a bishop in Scotland. But he was an odd candidate to be the person who was chosen. He was chosen by somewhere between 10 and 14, maybe it was 10 of the 14 clergy people at Glebe House in Woodbury. And he was a loyalist, and he'd been a loyalist all throughout the war. And let's see if I get my... yes, he wrote a series of loyalist pamphlets under the pen name A.W. Farmer, which stood for a Westchester farmer. And he also had been commissioned as chaplain to the King's American Regiment in 1778 and served in that capacity through most of the war. And here we were sending him over to England to become the first bishop of what became the Episcopal religion in this country. Just an interesting choice. Let's see, subsequent bishops, I wrote the section on church leadership. So I tried to go through and highlight pieces of information that would be of historical interest, not just to our church, but to people here. Reverend Abraham Joris was the second bishop of Connecticut, and he was the first to perform confirmations at St. Stephen's. 86 people were confirmed when he visited Ridgefield in 1809. Yeah, a lot of people have been waiting. It was a long line. Then Reverend Reuben Hubbard was the first to record church births, baptisms, marriages, and deaths, and he performed the first recorded baptisms at St. Stephen's on May 24th, 1812, baptizing Susan Keeler, daughter of David and Grace Keeler, and Harriet Howe, daughter of I don't know what that stands for, and Sarah Howe. Then we didn't get our first full-time rector until 1838. That was Eli Wheeler, and so a rectory was required. And the first rectory was built in 1838 on an acre of ground donated by a parishioner, Colonel Philip Burr Bradley, who had been a colonel in the Revolutionary War. One of the more interesting, well, it wasn't the bishop, the rector so much as his wife, Foster Eli, who was a rector from 1889 to 1906, and his wife, Harriet Ruth Brown Eli. She helped found the Village Improvement Society in 1899, and one of their accomplishments was to raise funds for the lamps on Main Street, extending from George Olcott's home, Casagmo, southward, permitting people the freedom from having to carry their own lanterns to light their way at night. So that was interesting to me. The women were getting involved. And John H. Chapin and his wife, the former Rosamond C. Lowe, who was the cousin of one of our prominent parishioners, Seth Lowe Pierpont. During his rectorship, the parish house, North Hall, was built and completed in 1909. The first annual fair of the Ladies' Guild was held in September 1906, which is considered the beginning of the Nutmeg Festival. And it plans to construct yet another church, the one we currently have, were finalized in 1914. And when Reverend Chapman secured the means to fund the church and the approval of the vestry, he figured his work was done, and he left. We had a couple of amazingly long tenured rectors, and the first was William B. Lusk. Plug your ears, Whitney.
I know.
He was referred to as Daddy Lusk.
That noise.
So we're going to call Whitney Mommy Whitney.
No, you're not.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, during his tenure, his 35-year tenure? Yeah, 1915 to 1950. That's a long time. He managed to see to it that the rents required to sit in the church, pew rents, he managed to see to it that those were abolished. And we still have the sign in front of the church. The seats in this church are free, all are welcome. This fascinates me too, he was granted a 7-month leave of absence during World War I to travel to Europe to set up a YMCA hut for Connecticut troops in France, so that the servicemen might find a touch of home life, recreation, and refreshments when off duty. He came back to a huge welcome from what I said, from the whole town, not just St. Stephen's. And then after Reverend Lusk, many of you know, came the Reverend Aaron Manderbach, and he was here for 30 years, from 1950 to 1980. During his tenure as rector, South Hall, which we call South Hall, the building to the south of the church, was acquired in 1958 from Electromechanical Research, the company that used it. And when they made their decision to leave Ridgefield and move to Sarasota, Florida, and they gave it to St. Stephen's.
They just didn't give any money to take care of it.
Yeah.
They just gave us the property.
There are problems with that. It was under Reverend Manderbach that a very large percentage of the proceeds from the Nutmeg Festival were determined. He decided that's going to charitable organizations, not to the betterment of the church. And so he was responsible for that. Let's see, I'm going to just tell an anecdote. It sounds like a horrible anecdote, but it's not, it's wonderful. About Aaron Manderbach. He, into his 90s, would serve as helping you out at the altar.
Yeah, I wasn't here, but who
sometimes
was
in
it?
your, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Whoever was
True,
here.
yes. And there was a time he was serving as a supply priest. I guess it was whoever it was. Mark Gilchrist was not able to serve. And he was there on a Sunday. And our altar is marble. And he slipped. And you heard his head hit the marble. He was in his 90s at the time. And I'm not saying he sprung up, but I mean, we had physicians and medical people in the audience, and they rushed to get him, and an ambulance came, and he was fine. And he served many times after that.
Yeah.
And he lived to be, well, we celebrated his 100th anniversary, his 100th birthday at the church, and he died at the age of 105.
Wow.
Wow. Blessed by God. And let's see, as when he was talking about women, it was under Frederick, the Reverend Frederick Bender, that the first female was ordained at St. Stephen's. I don't, any of you know, I don't know, Sandy Belcher, and she was a part-time assistant to the rector. That was in 1986. And the first clergyman at this church's woman was Joyce Nelson, who had held the position of senior warden, was the first woman to hold that position.
On the vestry, that's the elected board.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then we got the Reverend Dr. Whitney Altopp in 2012. And she is the 32nd rector of St. Stephen's. And as Whitney mentioned, since the war, we've had rectors. Before that, they were missionaries. So there's a number of clergy people before that, but Whitney is the 32nd rector. And her accomplishments include...
You don't have to go through all those.
They think
Let's see.
well, you made it possible to sell South Hall.
I
And you
did help.
oversaw...
I did help the church reconcile itself to that
Yes.
burden. A glorious house. Beautiful. But we couldn't afford it. It was running our life.
Yeah,
It
okay.
was hard.
I think that's it for clergy people.
Thank
Just wanted
you.
to add one thing to what I said before, and that is, if in 1810, if you were walked down Main Street and said, and asked, where is St. Stephen's, they'd say, St. Stephen's. We weren't called St. Stephen's until 1831. We were founded as the First Society of Ridgefield Church of England.
Yeah. And we've been on the same spot since the very first building. So I love it that the fourth graders in Ridgefield, they get their little town map and there's St. Stephen's on there because we're still in the same place. We're almost, I think every other congregation has moved in its lifetime. So we do have this book. I'm going to pass it around so you can look at it. It's here scrolling. Okay.
This way too.
You know, just to get a sense of what all is in there. And then we just thought we would open it up to questions to kind of see what it is you are interested in and have questions about. And no question is too silly. You don't have to know church stuff. It's okay. Yes.
Okay, so being new to Richfield, what is the Nutmeg Festival, and how many parishioners do you have now?
We have 400 households,
Okay.
which is usually how we measure things. And so I don't know how you would what kind of math you might do to get a number of people, but that's how we measure. Does anybody, Lori, do you want to talk about, or am I putting you on the spot? Lori's a longtime Ridgefielder and St. Stephen's member as well. But
Does everybody remember the Nutmeg Festival?
she doesn't because she's new.
No, I know. Almost everybody else remembers it. It was originally called a Cake and Apron Fair, I think. I'm not exactly sure what year it started. It went to go on for over 100 years. And it was kind of a favored event, oftentimes in August, I think. And there were all kinds of volunteers and committees and they had a white elephant barn for decorative arts. They had a little post office. They had furniture that was for sale on the lawns. In fact, I have a friend who, when I went to have dinner at their house, said, "Oh, all of our living room furniture is from the Nutmeg Festival." So it was very, very, very popular, and it was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, and it's one of the main ways people knew St. Stephen's. If we said to them, "Do you know St. Stephen's?" They'd be like, do you know the Nutmeg Festival?" "Oh, yeah. My grandmother brought me, and now I'm bringing my grandkids." So that was another painful loss. That festival was always held in August, as Lori mentioned, and the preparation began in March, usually, of that same year. And the leadership for that just kept dwindling and dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And but the work didn't dwindle. When it was begun, the rhythm of life was different. People came out here for the summer. So it was like, oh, good, let's make a thing for the town. We're all here over the summer. And it was exactly flipped. We found all our younger families were leaving in August for vacation. Camps were closed. They managed to get their vacation time coordinated. And we couldn't refurnish or refurbish or staff the event. So we just had to face the truth of that. It was a hard breakup. We counted it to 111 years of functioning. Yeah, it was a sad loss. Quoted in there, the woman who wrote the chapter that includes Nutmeg. I sound very casual. The congregation said, "Okay." No, the congregation did not say, "Okay." The congregation said, "Okay." Because people were really, it had been 5 years, I would say at least, of people, this has got to change, we've got to find a new way, let's try a new way, so, that was That's the Nutmeg Festival. And we have repurposed it. You know, we created a Nutmeg and Neighbors event. Again, more fellowship and social, but not needing, 6 months of preparation, hours and hours of work. And in fact, we wanted to make a photo history book to highlight the people that gave so much time. They might all look like the same people to you, but for us, we're like, oh, that person helped make sure we could get the parking lot laid. Oh, that person, put in 40 hours a week approximately for 3 years. Or that person, Randy Baldwin, he's in here fixing one of the sanctuary doors. And when he moved away, you remember Randy Baldwin, he was, dentist and lived his whole adult life pretty much here. When he moved away, we said, oh, we got to recognize him. Rob Kinnaird, who's been at the church since he was in utero, decided to write up a little thing to give Randy credit because of all the things he fixed. He's a woodworker. He loves doing that. And I said, what if we take a little, let's Xerox Randy's face and tape it to everything Randy has done at the church. I mean, you would have seen 50 Randy heads all over the campus, And so we are the congregation we are because of the people. And what they wanted to give and what they felt passionate about, what they cared about, how they showed up, the time they offered, the particular gifts that they brought in, just in their personhood. And we really wanted to celebrate that in this book and capture it as best we could, or reflect it, I guess, a little bit. So.
I'm just going to interject about gifts that people gave. One of the rector's wives, one of the more recent rector's wives, Dick Gilchrist's wife, Gail Gilchrist, decorated so much of the church and the church property. She was an amazing artist. And she did many murals in the rectory, just exquisite. And also in the choir room, which is in the basement of the church. And they surround the walls. They're just surrounded with her murals and exquisite. And then at some point she did the doors on Main Street. She drew it and...
Did you say Gail Gilchrist?
Yes.
Gilchrist,
Do you remember her?
Up there in town.
Did she?
I think so.
No. She was different Gilchrist, because I saw recently the obituary for John Gilchrist, which was actually our former...
No, there was another Gilchrist family, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
She was Southern, honey.
She was Southern. And so the rectory, this is the house that the rector lives in, which is helpful to the congregation for the clergy person to live in the house that they have. Will be open as part of the historical tour on December 6th, and we wanted to show off those murals. They are incredible. So I don't know how you conceive of something on that grand of scale, how you layer it to where you can get some things lighter than others, patterns, make sure they repeat enough, you don't run out of room for the head of the bird or something like that. And we have a bunch of these posters for donation only for our youth group that's going to go on a trip next spring. So we brought them with us, and you'll recognize some of the doors of Main Street. So we have those here today too.
That was one of my yes, they were.
Yeah.
So tell why St. Stephen's? What was the derivation of the name of the church?
I don't. Do you know why it was chosen?
I was thinking that was probably going to be a good question today.
And I don't have to worry about it because I didn't write beginnings. I didn't write that chapter. So I can just plead ignorance.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Episcopal Church does name their churches pretty much the same thing everywhere. So we're St. Stephen's Ridgefield. There's a St. Stephen's in Bloomfield. And there's a lot of St. Stephen's. So we always include our name, and you'll see that in the things that we list about ourselves. But Stephen was the first martyr of the church, and was stoned to death. And you can read about it in the Book of Acts early on in that chapter. I can't remember what chapter it's in, and so he's known as being he was one of the people that came on to kind of help do the way of Jesus, after the resurrection, and served people, which is what we call a deacon. So that's how he's known. But I don't know why that saint was chosen, and I'm not even sure how we give churches names, honestly, in the Episcopal Church. I don't know if it's a diocesan thing from the diocesan office. We organize ourselves very similarly to the Roman Catholics. We use a lot of the same words because we broke off from them. We took all the good stuff, we think. We left behind the stuff that just you get tangled up in. So that's why you'll hear some of the same words, and that's why I can't be Mommy Whitney, because it's not about you. It's about my relationship with the church, passing on the faith to the next generation. Fathers of the church, that's what they did. They passed the faith on to the next generation. But as you know, in Ridgefield, this isn't a place that uses those words much outside, at least in the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church here in town, has more of what we would call a broad church experience. So not the high church stuff that's all father, mother, smoke, bells, things like that, incense and things. So, St. Stephen's is a very Protestant Episcopal church. It really wears its Protestantism proudly. And that was a big deal in the development of the Anglican Church and the Episcopal Church in the United States. The Episcopal Church is part of the Anglican communion, united just through covenant. So anyway, yeah, St. Stephen's is a pretty low church experience. You can find another Episcopal church and they'll be wearing all the outfits and have all the roles and do the bells at the Eucharist and censor everything with the holy smoke and that sort of stuff. And that's not how St. Stephen's demonstrates its religious and worshiping life. Yes.
I knew, and I saw his picture up there, Dirk Bolenbach.
Yeah. Yes.
He was the church historian from
That's right.
1970.
He covered that period.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1975 to 2000. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a co-teacher. I taught at Ridgefield High School from '83 to past 2000. But I never knew that he was the church historian at St. Stephen's.
I'm so glad.
My sister's favorite teacher.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Best teacher I ever had.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
I mean, through graduate school, he was fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Oh.
He's the first person that used primary sources. The message you got, you're not going to learn anything about the revolution from reading a paragraph.
Right.
You have to read the newspapers. What were they eating? What were they buying? Who's fantastic?
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. Well, and he did, as you mentioned, write the history for 1975 to 2000 of St. Stephen's, and we do have some copies of that. I didn't bring it, but it is a primary source kind of book, And part of what we wanted to do with this photo history book was to say, because we have a lot of those copies. Nobody's saying, "Ooh, I want to," maybe you all would, say you want one of those books, but generally the population is not eager to read the minutes of meetings and who begat who and who begat who kind of things. So we intentionally chose a non-primary source. I mean, there are primary sources that were referred to in this, but this is a very high-level book in order to celebrate, what we have been handed down through people. So the list of sources is in the back, and of course, Linda and Lizzie did a lot of primary source, work, but.
Thank you, Jack Sanders.
Yes, exactly. He's one of our sources.
And Betsy.
Oh yeah, that's good. Wonderful.
Dirk used to give a history sermon every 4th of July.
Yeah.
And we would bring out a pewter cup that was from the early period.
So, thank you for reminding me that I wanted to make sure to tell everyone here, now I will. We are having a historical service on November 9th. So what is that, 3 weeks from now at 10 a.m.? The diocesan historian, the person who keeps all the files for the whole state of Connecticut, will be offering the homily that day. We are going to get out our things so people can see our stuff. Pewter cups. I think it was Aaron who turned in all of the original manuscripts so they could be bound and touched by a bunch of people. So we'll get those out, I think all that was done in the 60s or something. So it's kind of reverse Xerox of whatever, so you can see the script and see people's names and things like that. Because there were so many records kept, in churches. And for a good long time, and you all might remember this, you know, you could submit your baptism record for identification. You know, you could have your birth certificate, or you could take your baptism record, or maybe that was just in my neck of the woods. I grew up in Kentucky, but it was legit. It was considered an official document. So that's I really cherish that about the church. You know, things like that. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions on
Yeah.
gifts.
Yeah.
So I know Ann Richardson was a member of our club, and I know was very
Yes.
active at St.
Yes.
Stephen's. And in our archives, it says that in the late 1940s, she donated Carillon chimes to St. Stephen's, and I think still through the Richardson Fund, money is available to keep those going. I just wanted to confirm that you still, I know you have a gorgeous organ. Do you still have the Carillon
We
chimes
do,
too?
and we're kind of figuring out what to do with that. It is 1940s, or maybe a little bit later, but it's this huge, like a refrigerator size device, you know, that has a roll, like a piano roll, that goes through and dings all the chimes, which are small and then amplified. So this was good high-tech stuff then, but the rolls are starting to wear.
So you don't use it?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
it
you
plays
still-
every day,
Oh,
noon and
okay.
5. Yeah,
Oh,
we put the
wonderful.
roll on. But all the rolls are seasonal, and like Christmas season is very brief, so it didn't get worn out very much. We have ordinary time, you know, this time when we're not having Easter and Advent and all these kind of things, and those are the ones that are getting worn out. So we're trying to figure out how to preserve the capacity to play music, and there's even a little keyboard up there, so you can interrupt the carillon, or you can play a few notes and it'll chime, you know, like sort of start of a wedding, and we want to do more of that. We want to be able to do peals and that sort of thing for particular events. It's too hard right now. So.
And then
yeah.
the other question I had again related to Ann Richardson, is that my understanding, again from our archives, is that she had donated money, like for long term, for flowers on the altar for her partner Edna Scheuer in August, I think, and maybe Edna's mother at Christmas or something like that. And is that still?
That still
going on?
happens.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a plaque in the narthex. That's kind of the entryway of the sanctuary, which, by the way, it's open during daylight hours in the southern doors of the sanctuary. But yeah, there's a plaque there and a standing financial contribution to the church to make sure that happens, well above what flowers cost. She's one of our biggest givers still, even from the grave, you know. So it's very astounding and humbling to see the difference a person can make, lots of different ways.
Do you want to mention the Hitchcock Road or not?
Yeah, one of the limitations for this book was photos. People didn't take them, or they did, and they have been, you know, in a drawer and stuck to each other, and we couldn't get them good enough quality to put in the book. So some of the photos, or a good number of the photos, are more recent, just in the last couple decades. So we don't have any, you know, visibility from Louisa Hitchcock, who this was during Reverend Vanderbach's time. And is it recorded in the book, the story?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Okay, I only read it once. Linda read it 5 times, so she's our copy editor. Don't tell her if there's a comma that's not supposed to be there. Just don't tell her. She's happy now. See how happy she is? I don't think there's a comma out of place, but so Louisa Hitchcock was a Ridgefielder. Do you want to tell the story more?
I think you can tell the story.
Okay. And she had written in her will, you know, who was to get what upon her death, and at the bottom it said anything left over goes to St. Stephen's for parishioners who are in need or want. And she didn't update her will. When, before she died, several people had predeceased her, and she didn't update her will. If you ask, you know, I'm trying to remember which parishioner says she had a bad lawyer, you know, like, anyway, her bad lawyer, whatever, came to our benefit, because upon her death, we received a huge amount of money. And because it was very particularly allocated, and it took us as a church, I wasn't here, but during Vanderbach's time, a while to kind of create some parameters for the disbursement of that for need or want, it grew into the millions. So, so it really is a wonderful support to people. People do not take advantage of it. They're always sure there's somebody else who needs it more. That's one of my favorite quotes I hear from people. And it's very hard for people to ask for help. But it has, those that have availed themselves of it, it's made all the difference in their lives. So it's wonderful to have that as well, in her memories.
It's paid people's mortgages.
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
and, So,
Yeah.
It's not to be used for the upkeep.
Correct. No, we have used it like to put in an elevator for people, because things like that. But no, not for the upkeep of the church. Yeah.
Didn't Vice President Henry Wallace leave a lot of money to the church in the form of stock? And that
I
was
have
discovered.
heard that.
Oh, yeah?
I remember Dick Gilchrist saying that to me once. Actually driving by his house going, see? That's where a lot of our money came from. So I've heard that, but that's all I know.
But there were no restrictions on it.
I don't think so. Yeah, because I would then definitely know his name if there were restrictions. Because there's.
Was it corn or something?
Yeah, it was a corn stock from
Didn't
the
he
Midwest. But
Wow.
what's
For
that?
all I
Didn't
know.
he do something with the corn, with the kernels of corn? I thought he
He was.
manufactured
He was
or he
basically
invented.
a farmer. Yeah.
Yeah, he invented something with the corn kernels. I remember
Yeah.
Tim Keeler saying something.
Yeah, but he lived in
He
South
was from
Salem.
South
Yeah, he
Salem.
lived in South Salem.
South Salem.
Right.
But
Yeah,
They probably
very
worshiped.
attached
You're
to
right.
St. Stephen's.
His funeral was at St.
Yeah.
Stephen's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I think we should mention Bob Haight too, who wrote
Right.
a huge history of the church and,
Yes.
and just more detailed than you can imagine. It's a great read, really.
Yeah.
1725 to
I guess
1975.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He covered that period. Yeah, he was
And
fabulous.
footnoted to beat the band.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful.
We're looking for a historian of that caliber. Like who wants to try to fill?
She didn't find them enough.
No, or golden box shoes. Who wants to go all the way down? Yeah. We just didn't think we could pull that off. Yeah.
Was the North Hall built with the church, or was that a separate home?
It was never a home. Now the rectory sits in the middle, and that is the home.
That's
and
the
it
home.
was built the same year as the sanctuary.
Okay.
So, 1915. Yeah. And that's the house where the Gilchrist lived, where Gail painted the murals. It's the house that'll be on the tour. You see a lot of signs up around it that say private, 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 and that's because at every place you see one of those signs, someone has just walked in the door of our house. So we like it that we don't have to worry about locking our doors, in Ridgefield, but it's really not fun to have someone enter your home and you're like, oh, what are you doing here? So there are lots, but you would be surprised at how clueless people can be about where they are.
Is the house that you sold,
South
is
Hall.
is that going to be on the house tour also?
No, I think that one was on the house tour a year or so ago, 351 Main Street.
Yeah, it was the
Right, it
opening
was-
party for
Yeah.
the house tour.
And it needed every bit of what the present owners put into it. We just could not keep up with that house. And we knew when we got word from the fire marshal that because it was a public building, we needed to have a certain sprinkler system, and it was going to be $70,000. We said, "Oh my gosh, we have to figure this out. We just can't keep doing this." So that was a very emotional and intense time because for some people who had come to the church since it had been acquired, they had a lot of attachment to that building. So it held for them kind of more than just a property, it held a lot of emotional value, so, yeah.
The rectory that preceded the rectory where Whitney lives is now on Katuna Street. It's across the street from the firehouse.
Really?
And I think there's a business in there called Total Mortgage.
Yeah.
Nancy O's used to be in there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Didn't know that. That was the rectory?
It
That was
was.
the
The
rectory. They had
original rectory?
Well, that was one of the earliest rectories.
Yeah.
And it had been the home of a very prominent member of our church. So we really don't know quite when it was built. But when he died, it was given, the church acquired it. I don't think it was given to the church.
And it stood a lot closer to the road than the present rectory did. When they built the new one,
Okay.
they moved it back so you'd have like a little campus in front.
Yeah, true.
Green.
Yes, we like that. Yeah.
It was great for the Nutmeg Festival.
Yeah,
Yes.
there was some. We loved the day of the Nutmeg Festival. It was all the pre and post that was just overwhelming. Yeah.
It was always a favorite place for people who were running for office.
Yeah.
You know, the shake hands.
We've had good apple pies.
I bet.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the fair that had the apple
I
pies.
believe so,
Oh,
yeah.
that was a project in itself.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had little wooden homes for each booth. That
Yes.
had to be constructed and erected each time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
Um,
picture in
it
here
was-
somewhere of your husband, drilling
I
it up
can remember
together.
Louise McKeon selling corn, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
The fresh vegetables booth.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lynn Ryer and Jean Jacobs
Yes.
also
Yeah.
were at that booth for
Mhm.
a lot of years.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Very fond memories.
Yeah.
That's why we love this
Right.
book.
That's why we love this book.
Does anyone have any other memories or stories they'd like to share about St. Stephen's Church? Reverend Altopp, could you talk a little bit about some of the social initiatives that St. Stephen's is doing for the Ridgefield community or has been doing for decades? You're doing such important work.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I love about being an Episcopalian, and I didn't grow up Episcopal, I grew up Methodist. My late father was a Methodist pastor. So when I was somewhere with him as a young adult, someone said, "Larry, how'd you raise your daughter to be Episcopal?" He said, "Very well, thank you." I said, "That's true, that's really true." But one of the things that I value so much about the Episcopal Church is the emphasis on the incarnation and just that being people, being human. It's a lot of work. It can be messy and complicated. It can be 2 steps forward and 1 step back kind of living and life. And so when I came to the Episcopal Church, I did so with my emphasis. I was hired as a youth minister. This was up in Skaneateles, New York. And so I thought I should attend worship there. They hired me for staff, And I love that we have a general confession as part of worship. So the whole congregation says together in unison a confession. And I thought, you know what? That's honest. I don't know what your stuff is. You don't know what my stuff is, but we know we both got stuff.
Yeah.
We both got stuff here.
That's right.
So, so I really appreciated that. And as I've been a priest for 22 years, I just value that all the more. Because we're trying to do the best we can here as people on this earth. And so it's through that I have felt even learning about the ancestors of the faith, even here in Connecticut, you realize how much risk they took to make the church what they thought it needed to be for the world they were in. And I'd only been to the Glebe House for the first time just this past year, and learned that the man who had led that congregation was beaten to within an inch of his life because he was a Tory. And I thought, oh gosh, well, no one's beating me up yet, so okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to just keep going because no one's at my door. Plus, I have these private signs around, so it should help. No, but in all seriousness, there's really a desire to speak to the needs of that community and to nurture the faith life of those people. And so I feel inspired by them as I continue in that work. And the Episcopal Church is really wrestled with a lot of things. The Episcopal Church was the first to, say out loud it was okay to use birth control. And that was a huge deal. Frances Perkins was an Episcopalian. She was the only one that sat on FDR's cabinet for 4 years. She's the founder of Social Security. Someone said the Shirtwaist Factory fire was her 9/11, where she said, oh my gosh, we have to do something. So to have those kind of people, Constance Baker Motley, I don't know if you know that name, but she was a civil rights attorney, really accompanied James Meredith in his, worked with him as a lawyer when he was trying to desegregate the University of Mississippi. Did I get that right? Or is it Arkansas? Anyway, I'm sorry about that. So this is why you need to always double check my history. I'm almost there. I'm like 90% of the way there. But, you know, she was an Episcopalian and her marriage is recorded in St. Luke's, New Haven. And it's like, oh my goodness. You know, so we try to show up for that. And so we were we finally worked out women's ordination. It was 50 years old last year, I think it was. Wasn't it just last year, or was it the year before? Yeah. That was hard. And to see the video footage from that time period and to hear people say, it's just not the right time. This just isn't the right time. You're like, oh gosh, I think I said those words about something recently. You know, so these social conflicts, you know, they're just never really comfortable. And I'm inspired by them on that. It was only in 2003 that we ordained the first openly gay man to the role of bishop in a committed relationship, because it wasn't legal to be married, I don't think, yet anywhere. And you know, and that sent shockwaves all over the world, and we didn't realize the ripple effect that would have. And in some ways, the Anglican Church is still wrestling with this. I mean, the Church of England, which is part of the Anglican Communion, just elected its first Archbishop of Canterbury, named a woman. They've only been ordaining women to be bishops for a handful of years. It's like 3 or 5 years or something. So these kind of things, how to show up in the world as it is really a big deal to us as a congregation, and I think really reflects the Episcopal tradition, you know, way beyond me, way beyond St. Stephen's. You know, it's really at its core. Because as Lizzie mentioned, the first bishop to be here, you know, England wouldn't even make him a bishop. He had to go to Scotland to get the you know, the blessings and the stamp. So the Episcopal Church in the United States has a lot of Scottish influence in it. So yeah, it's really fascinating. And you know, we're just living our days, right? But who's going to come after us and be living their days off of our days lived? And I think that's a wonderful invitation. So I think we try to be as honest with ourselves as we can in that, and show up for people as they are. God will work out the rest. I don't know if that answers your question very much, Stephen, but thanks for the prompt.
Thank you so much. And could you share with everyone who's watching on Facebook how they might be able to obtain a copy of your beautiful new book?
Thank you. Well, we're trying to get it purchasable on our website. Hopefully by the end of the month that'll be possible. We took a financial risk on this, so it's a little overpriced, if you will, but just consider that you're helping the church. So the extra little money, there's $75 for just one. If you buy 2 or more, there's $60 a piece. But we hope that people will see Ridgefield reflected in this book. We think Ridgefield's reflected in this book, and we were very intentional about that. You know, one of my friends just realized he was related to one of the clergy that served here. You know, and he's not even a church-going person. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my ancestor. I think he learned about it through here. Yeah. So, so anyway, you know, this is a beautiful town, a wonderful community, and we love being on Main Street, and we really want to be good stewards of the fact that we are. So I did bring maybe 10 copies with me today if you want to buy one. I brought posters if you want one of those. Those are donation only, and like I said, these are for sale. So, and hopefully, like I said, at the end of the month, we'll be up and running online. And you're all invited to come to 10 a.m. on November 9th and to hear from Greg Farr, our diocesan historian, who's going to sound more like Bolenbach than me. Than I do. He's gonna bring out the goods, and we'll have some things on display and things there.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions or comments, memories, or stories? Okay, I think this is a good point to close. I want to thank Reverend Altopp, as well as Linda and Lizzie, for joining us today and sharing the remarkable history of St. Stephen's Church. You know, we are so grateful to count you as friends here, and it's so important that you're this wonderful landmark on Main Street in Ridgefield, and we wish you many more years to come as well. And I would like to remind everyone who's here and watching again that if you have any memories or stories to share about St. Stephen's Church, to please reach out to me, and we will schedule an oral history interview with you. Oral histories are so important, and it's one of the core missions of the Historical Society here. We have over 300 oral history interviews in our collection with Ridgefield residents, talking about various topics, and we would love to record, preserve, and share your memories and stories about St. Stephen's Church. So please reach out to me if you're interested in participating in that. And I'd like to briefly remind everyone about some of our upcoming programs while I have your attention. So for those of you who are members of the Historical Society, tonight is our annual meeting here at the Scott House at 5 o'clock. Please join us if you're interested in hearing about our past year. The last Sundays at the schoolhouse will be coming up on Sunday, October 26th. Sally and Jack Sanders will have the Peter Parley Schoolhouse open from 1 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon on West Lane, and this is the last Sunday of the season, so come in costume and we'll have some treats for you. Admission is free. On November 13th, we will be hosting a program at St. Stephen's Church North Hall titled Benedict Arnold, Connecticut's Most Misunderstood Trader. Of course, he's known as a hero of the Battle of Ridgefield by us here in town, but not so much as we all know as a national figure. So Mike Allen is going to be giving this really interesting presentation at 6:30 p.m. on November 13th. Here Lies Ye Body, a talk and walk with Jack Sanders at Lounsbury House, and Ira Joe Fisher will take place on Saturday, November 15th, and the walk to Mapleshade Cemetery will take place on Sunday, November 16th. The walk through the cemetery is sold out, but there are a few tickets left for the talk at Lounsbury House. And then, as Reverend Altopp mentioned, our big event for the season is the Ridgefield Holiday House Tour on Saturday, December 6th. There will be 6 private homes open for viewing throughout the Main Street area of Ridgefield. And this is a benefit for the Historical Society in Tiger Hollow. So we encourage you to join us for that wonderful event. And our next History Club will take place on Tuesday, November 18th, here at the Scott House at 10 o'clock. Our special guests will be Melanie Marks and April Perea, and they are historians who have been doing research into the homes that are going to be featured on the Holiday House Tour. So we're going to do a deep dive into those histories, and you'll be learning about who built those houses, who lived in them, and a lot of interesting stories that they've uncovered. So please join us for the next History Club, Tuesday, November 18th, here at 10 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.